Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Minority Report, featuring myself, Sebastian Sanchez, and my good friend Bobby G. Slaughter.
What's up, Sebastian?
How you doing, Bobby?
Good. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back on this wonderful station with E. Carice showing us how to do this thing.
That is correct. And before we get started, I would like to go ahead and thank anyone and everyone who tuned into last week's show, all the people who provided positive feedback to us. We appreciate the response, and we're going to build from that. So Bobby and I were discussing some topics that we saw in the news recently, and amongst one of those was an article that Bobby found about the LA housing crisis.
Yeah, I was recently actually watching TV, and the CBSN network was doing a story about an estimated 17,000 children who are homeless in L.A. Because of the homeless crisis that is happening in L.A. with the renters being able to take back renting space or available apartments with 60 days notice and put people out of their homes. And I thought this was an interesting story because I didn't realize LA was having such a housing crisis. I knew it was happening in San Francisco and some other places. And so when I brought this up to Sebastian and we were talking about it, he said that he'd actually experienced this before.
So here's the thing. The term homelessness has kind of taken a change, I would say, maybe in the last 10 years. We used to assume homelessness as someone who just didn't have a house, who lived on the street. Right. But really, it's anyone who's displaced by housing. So technically, someone who lives, and I know this from a perspective as an educator, because I've taught many students in multiple locations where they're affected by homelessness. And they would be considered homeless if you're either living with a specific relative, let's say, for weeks at a time, but it's not your consistent home, or if you spend specific nights away from home. So, for example, children of migrant workers a lot of times would be considered homeless by today's definitions. And I happened to have a student many years ago who was homeless himself. He was literally living in shelters during his junior and senior year of high school while still commuting to work. And that is something that hit home right away because it was someone that I saw on a daily basis. And on several occasions, I would drop off the student to the shelter to see if he got a place for the night. And so, yeah, it's something that I'm familiar with. And I also got to experience myself when I first moved to the country. I would say I was around 6 years old in 1992 when we arrived. My mom didn't really have any long-term planning, so it was just her and 3 kids with $200, and the plan was to stay with an uncle. But that didn't last very long. There was friction between my uncle's wife at the time, and after about a month or two, we kind of had to find a place to go. And then the only people that were willing to take us at the time was my uncle's ex-wife. So talk about drama, Latin drama. I mean, it was a mess. And mind you, we didn't even speak English. And then that lasted about a week before the lady was accusing my sister of eating bread. And on top of that, they had like 6 cats, and we were sleeping on the floor and on the couch. So it wasn't until my mom was able to use her charm and her wit and her hard work to convince a property manager at a very affordable complex to allow her to move in with us without a deposit, without the first month's rent, pretty much just like an IOU in exchange for her services for cleaning the grounds. Wow. And that's how we got started. So, yeah, I have some experience there. What about you, Bobby?
Yeah, well, my family, my mom was a single mom. We did not actually go homeless, but when her and my dad got divorced, it was under not the best circumstances, so she just left the house with 3 kids in tow. My baby brother wasn't there at the time. And I just remember, because I was the oldest, her driving around the city looking for a place or something to do, and finally finding a hotel because she didn't really have a whole lot of money. She didn't have great credit either. And I remember her opening up a can of pork and beans because that's all she had at the time. That she just grabbed the first couple things that she get, and that was that. But it didn't last long because we had great relatives, and once they found out, they kind of helped my family. So I think I can identify with that somewhat because, like I said, it's one of those things I've seen. I've experienced being in the military. I've seen real homelessness, people that are truly homeless. And then, of course, driving around this country, you've seen people that, as you say, aren't homeless. They are a new minority of homelessness.
Correct. And you mentioned something that triggered a memory of mine. So you said that you ate pork and beans, correct?
Yes.
Now, here's the ironic part. There is a housing project in Miami's Overtown area, and the official name is called Liberty Square. And it's actually the oldest housing project that was brought forward by, I believe at the time it was President Roosevelt. FDR brought it part. I think it was part of the New Deal, where he was trying to find proper housing at the time for the black community that was displaced while they were building I-95.
Wow.
And when he built this at the time, that was the name. Well, unofficially, the Liberty City Square Park is actually referred to by my students. This is how I found out. They refer to as the Poke and Beans. and that is actually what it's known by. When I would ask students, I was like, "Oh, where do you live?" Their response was, "Mister, do you know the beans?" And then when my years of teaching, I learned about the beans. They're like, "Yep, I know exactly what that is." So interesting you mentioned with that. Now, as far as the LA housing crisis go, I think it's safe to say that most people who are paying attention to the news have come to realize one form or the other, housing is getting expensive nationwide.
Yeah.
It's not just limited to LA. Obviously, California has always been an expensive state to live in. The Bay Area has always been overpriced, and that is, we can blame it on the government. We can blame it on a lot of things, and a lot of times we speak maybe not without the most information, but really it's just a matter of supply and demand. It's just capitalism at its finest, and that is something we have to either accept or come to terms with if you're going to be living in a capitalist country like this one is. So from my perspective, what I've noticed in California is the San Francisco Bay Area has just skyrocketed due to the influx of these high salaries of all these tech companies and their employees. They get paid signing bonuses in the millions of dollars. So just imagine what their salaries and stock options are. To them, paying $6,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment is insignificant. But what does that do to our common worker?
That's a great point you make. I actually know a couple people that work in California who make significant salaries, but they don't own houses.
Right.
Because even with the salary and the amount of state taxes that they pay and the cost of living in California, still makes it kind of, that's a premium. Housing is a premium there. And I think one of the things that they were talking about in this story is that some of the people that are homeless, they actually make like $52,000 a year, which in California, that don't cut the mustard,
Absolutely. That same, for example, this is coming from a person, my highest salary has been $50,000. I'm not someone who's made a lot of money in my life. However, I always encourage my students and anyone who's willing to listen, it's not about how much money you make, rather how much money you save. Based on what you can save, you'll be surprised how far your salary can go. And it's just a matter of budgeting. So for example, that same $52,000 salary you talked about in California, well, that $52,000 salary won't be able to pay basic rent.
No.
That's what has driven many people to seek refuge into living either in their cars, in their vans. A lot of people have decided to buy or to lease some of these campers. And California is been very lackadaisical in terms of allowing these vehicles to be parked. Walmarts have always welcomed them, and it's become a cheaper alternative to just pay for gas rather than paying first month, last month security deposit on a place where the rent runs $2,500 to $3,500. But in your opinion, Bobby, you're a homeowner now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is something that I wanted to get your take from because you probably purchased your home using your military benefits.
Initially, I didn't, but I did. Eventually, I'm sorry. I came out here and I actually got a traditional loan.
Okay.
And then when the rates went down, I actually refinanced and used the VA to refinance my loan to a lower rate.
Okay. Now, for some reason, not many people know this about myself, but I have found most of my success through real estate. And again, I've never had a high salary. It was just about saving the little bit that I earned on a teacher's salary. And I believe on Friday or tomorrow, I'm going to be closing on, this is going to be my fourth property that I would have either owned at some point. And the way that I've accomplished this, believe it or not, is just taking advantage of the federal programs. So what a lot of people don't know is that home ownership is very possible and within reach for any average American. You don't need to make a high salary. I never have. And the only requirements are that you have decent or respectable credit. And here's the catch. Even if your credit is terrible, there are some government programs. For example, the FHA program, it's the Federal Housing Association's program, administration, I'm sorry. And their requirement is if you have bad credit, it doesn't even matter. You only need to come up with 3.5% of a down payment. So just to give you a rough idea, if you're buying property in Arkansas, you can very realistically buy either a house or a great condo for $100,000. You would only need to come up with $3,500 for a down payment. The government would take care of the rest.
Yeah, I think you actually go back to your earlier statement, though. I think for a lot of people that, because there's another story that says that a lot of Americans are actually living from payday to payday, and it goes back to the whole thing of budgeting, you know, and getting your finances under control, which is one of the things we talked about last week. And I think we can't underscore that enough, in that the first step of the process to changing this for your family, for yourself, is actually trying to get your finances under control. And I know that that's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
But at some point, you got to make a stand, and you got to start trying to turn that ship, because that does affect your ability to eventually find housing. Like I said, you were saying earlier, one lady in California was making $72,000 a year, and that's what was required for a 2-bedroom apartment.
Absolutely. And here's something that someone told me when I was graduating college. Mind you, at the time, my job was working as a server at a restaurant and at a banquet hall. So I was making about $9, $9.50 an hour. I looked at my tax returns, and in the year, I made $11,000. $11,000 to me at the time, believe it or not, I still had savings. I still had around $1,500 to $2,000 as a nest egg after I paid all my bills on an $11,000 salary. So when I was getting ready to graduate and I was starting to flirt with the idea of having a job that would pay me $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, I was almost quadrupling in my head, multiplying my current savings with what I would expect. And I would expect to have $10,000 a year saved up. And most people think that's ridiculous, but it's not. That's exactly how I did it. My first year teaching, I had entry-level teacher salary. I had $38,500. That is what they paid me.
No student loans.
Zero student loans. So here's the thing. Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. The key.
Because that's the key.
This is the key for anybody who is listening who has either a high school student, a middle school student, you yourself, or maybe a single parent. The key to success, okay, and this is long-term success, not just for you, but for your kids and the following generations. And this is coming from a person who came here not speaking a language. I recycled cans with my sister as a child in order to receive funding. Give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that. We're right back. I'm noticing the comments here. A lot of people that are listening, and I appreciate you, Courtney and Paula. Yes, student loans. So the key to success, and like I said, I came into the country very young with a single mom. She was a housekeeper. I helped her with cleaning the houses. So did my sisters. We worked in jobs just like delivering and selling water, newspapers, flowers. The bottom of what the bottom we would associate. You know, that is how we started. And I had to wait my turn to become an adult to be able to make a significant contribution to my family. And the key was I focused all of my energy getting excellent grades while I was in middle and high school so that I would be able to go to college for free. I knew I didn't have the option of student loans, not because I didn't want to get in debt. It was because I was an illegal alien and I didn't qualify for student loans. So I had a different perspective. My goal was not only do I have to get accepted to college, I got to somehow score highly enough on my grades so that I can go for free. And doing that was the biggest and best decision I ever made, because when I finally did get accepted, not only did I graduated with $0 of loans. So every penny that I started making was directly to my pocket, as opposed to students who don't consider the long term. They want to join fraternities. They want to have a great college experience while they're there, which means they don't want to work while they're in school. And the times that they do work is just for pocket money. And to me, that is a terrible approach. You want to capitalize your options while you're in school, get a job, build up a savings, even if it's minimal, working in fast food, whatever it takes, and keeping your expenses low. And then I was able, my first year teaching, with a salary of $38,500, I was able to save $19,000 in 1 year. And that is something that a lot of people either don't fathom or think it's unattainable, but it is attainable if you don't commit yourself to student loans and if you don't go out and get a car note. The main thing people make mistakes on is they want to live a comfortable life, but they don't want to sacrifice their saving potential. In other words, they want to live the rich life, but on a poor man's salary. And that's not something that we can do. I tell people all the time, I tell my students, I tell anyone who's willing to listen, if you have to ride the bus for a couple of years, you ride the bus. You don't go out and get a car loan. You don't have someone co-sign for you and get a 60-month or 72-month lease on a vehicle that's $299 a month. And then on top of that, you add the car insurance. What you don't realize is you're ending up paying nearly $700, $800 a month just to get from point A to point B on something that is going to depreciate over time. And even if it does depreciate, sometimes it's not even your vehicle because it's a lease and you have to return it. The flip side is you buy your cars cash. You buy your cars cash. Now, this means you ride the bus for 2, 3, 4 years, then you buy the car cash. And you don't buy a new car, you buy a used car. You want to buy a car that is at least 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, you do the maintenance yourself, and you buy them cash. Now, why do I say this? When you're buying a home, one thing they're going to look at besides your down payment is your debt to income ratio. And here's what Bobby was mentioning. So Bobby mentioned the LA housing crisis. There's another article that we're going to post a link to where Charles Barkley, the famous basketball player, he is donating and selling all of his memorabilia. And the reason for it is he wants to raise money to fix and help the housing crisis in his town in Alabama. Now, he is affected in seeing this in Alabama, and we're talking about this in California. We're talking about two extremes of the continent. Now, what that does is it shows you that the problem is nationwide. Doesn't matter where you live. If you are a tenant, rent will go up. Rent is always going to go up. It is never going to go down. And the reason for that is because it's supply and demand. People are overpopulating. We're having more people. We need places for them to live in. There's not enough place. We have to build more places. That requires real estate. So again, the success to your generation is going to be based on home ownership. You want to stop being a tenant if possible, and eventually get to the point where you can be the owner and never have your rent go up. Bobby, what are your thoughts as being a homeowner, having a mortgage, having a fixed rate mortgage? How do you feel when other people are affected by the rising rent, knowing your rent does not go up?
Well, I mean, that was a process. Again, being in the military afforded me some benefits that other people don't have. So if you join the military, housing is provided to you, either if you live on base or they give you salary for your housing in addition to that. So, and they give you financial training. The military actually punishes you if you don't live within your finances. They actually preach living financially responsible. But even with that, a lot of people don't realize that military people qualify for welfare because they don't make what people think. Most military people, up until probably 7 years, are probably making less than $50,000. So they can't afford housing depending on where they are. So they actually get supplemental income. It could be COLA, cost of living allowance or something like that, or basic allowance for it. But for me, I think the big change was at some point I began to save, just as you did. I began to budget. I always knew about it, but at the same time, I needed somebody that was there working with me. And once we turned the ship, it became more possible. One of the things that really helped me was reading some books. Think and Grow Rich was one of the books that I read. It was by Napoleon Hill. Another book I read was The Richest Man in Babylon. Was a book that kind of helped me to get my mind right. But the book that really helped me to change my financial perspective of my ability to save was a book by Dave Ramsey. Now, I'm not a conservative, but Dave Ramsey wrote a great book called The Financial Peace University. And in this book, he basically asks you to do what you're saying, to go through your finances and look at some of the things that you may not be realizing may be opportunities to save. For me, the biggest thing I found was Starbucks. For a long time, I was a big Starbucks fan. Every day, Starbucks, Starbucks, Starbucks. And he said, well, how much do you spend on Starbucks? I looked at it, and I was spending over $300 a month on Starbucks just by myself. That wasn't including what my family was buying in Starbucks. And so when we started to look at those things, we began to get control of our finances. And I agree with you. You got to find some way to start turning the ship so that you can be more responsible financially. That helped me to afford my first house, to be able to live within my means, to have the money there. And again, being military, I had the benefit of not having to make a down payment because, again, when you use a VA loan, you don't have to put a down payment on a house.
You know, it's funny that you mention living within your means, that the military taught you that, because I had a kind of an epiphany. My budget when I was in college was $3 per day. That was my budget for food. In other words, I had a quota of $90 a month. I couldn't exceed 90 a month for food. So I had to find ways to stay with under 90 for one person for food. And I've always been a hungry kid. I've been a skinny kid, but I've always had the appetite of an animal. I've always eaten several meals throughout the day. But to do that on a $3 budget, there is nothing you can buy right now. Even if you go to McDonald's, even if you buy two things, buy two items from the dollar menu, you're already at $2.12, 13 cents, 14 cents, depending on the state you live in, somewhere up to $2.15. So you can't even buy a third item. So you have to budget yourself, and that's for the whole day. So what I had to do, I had to stock up on noodles, obviously, a lot of noodles, a lot of pasta, a lot of rice. I would go to the grocery store once, buy my $70 worth, and whatever I had at the house is what I ate, and whatever I ran out, I had to make it work. So one of the things that I would do is I made friends with an employee at a college cafeteria for kids who lived on campus. I didn't have the luxury of living on campus because I couldn't afford it, and I didn't have parents who just paid for college like the other kids did. So I had to sneak in, and I kind of found someone else's ID, and I just started using their ID, pretending I was that person when the correct employee was there who didn't check the photo. And that's how I ate and made up for the times that I exceeded my $3 budget. And things like that at the time I felt it was unfair. There was such a gap. I felt like I was angry at the world. Why is my situation like this? Why is my college experience not fun? Why am I not in fraternities and going to parties and going to these keggers that all the white kids went to? And I remember someone asked me, he's like, dude, why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you holding a cup here at this kegger? And I remember just looking at these people like, well, it's quite basic. I don't have the luxury to live your life. I don't have the parental and financial backing that you have. You can afford to make mistakes. You can afford to find yourself. That is why you're here in college. And that's why your parents sent you, to get straightened out, to get an identity. I'm not here for those reasons. I am here to stop the cycle of poverty that my family has been living. I am the only male. I am the youngest male. And it is my job to break that. So I had to do that by being somewhat distant with people around my demographic, around my own age group, which is another reason why I affiliate and associate myself so well with the older generation. And Bobby, you and I are pretty good friends, and we are of completely different generations.
Yeah, you're right. We have a question from Courtney Blyden Randall. Student loans are a reality for people now. What do you suggest? Which I think is a great question, and Icarice provided an answer for you online. You can read that there. I would also suggest, if you can, refinance your student loan. That's one option. I know that the government has a program right now where they would allow you to do a forfeiture of your student loan if your financial situation isn't correct, or if you're struggling with that. That's the best thing, is to try to see if you can delay that loan until you can try to get your finances back under control, because again, that's one of those things that when it comes down to it, that could probably be pushed back. Nobody wants to push back a debt, but if that's what you need to start turning that ship, that's one of the things I would recommend. And thank you, Miss Courtney, for that question.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. For those of you who are not yet in school, like if you already took out loans, your options at this point are limited. You got to stop the bleeding. Don't take out any more, and keep your expenses as low as possible when it comes to schools. For those of you who haven't yet chosen a school, you're thinking about going to college, but you're probably maybe being influenced by others. Here's your tips that I give to my high school students and anyone who's willing to listen. You must stay within your means. Pick a state school. Pick a public school. Don't go to a private school. Don't go to these online colleges or universities that are offering the convenience of working from home, doing everything online, because they charge a premium for that comfort, for that service. And I know I worked for one of the big major U.S. online universities before I became a teacher, and I quit that profession.
Which one?
I don't know if I'm at liberty to discuss, but I think I could say it. I worked for Strayer University before I became a teacher. And I left that field because I didn't think it was the best way to promote education. I've always been a proponent that education should be free, and it's something that we all have a right to, but you also have to be responsible of choosing your school. Choose something that is within your means, not something that is quick or easy. Now, here is something that we have to discuss: financial aid.
I also want to add into that, one of the things I would highly not recommend is taking out any of those payday loans, any of those quick loans to save your situation, because you're basically borrowing from another lender to pay a lender. And again, I know it's easier said than done, but believe me, there are sources out there. And one of the things we're going to try to do as this show continues on is we're going to try to put some sources out there that you can go to and try to find some assistance with that, because the first thing you got to do is find a way within your means to address the situation.
Absolutely. And you know what? Someone mentioned to me, they asked me a question about what is exactly financial aid. It's a term that we throw out loosely without really knowing the implications. So financial aid is any kind of financial assistance that you're getting to go to college. It could be someone giving you money, a parent. It could be a job that's providing some sort of tuition reimbursement. But ultimately, it comes down to two forms: federal loans, private loans, and then federal grants. What the difference between a loan and a grant is night and day. A grant, you are receiving a gift from the government just for going to college. You don't have to pay that money back at all. It is a thank you for educating yourself and contributing to the economy. A loan, on the other hand, whether it's federal or not, does have an interest rate, which means as you're borrowing it, the interest is growing and compounding, and you're going to owe more by the time you are done. Now, what happens, there's loopholes. People try to stay in college for as long as possible to avoid repayment. I don't recommend that either because the interest is still accruing. Some companies or some programs will offer forgiveness. If you have a loan, they'll wipe it out after 10 or 15 years of service. We don't know if we're going to live 10 or 15 years, and we don't want to wait 10 or 15 years to be debt free. So what you want to do is look for programs where you can get grants over loans. Now, to get a grant, though, it's not as easy as just applying. You have to make under a certain quota. So what you do is you fill out a FAFSA application, and once you're done with that, after all the information you put in based on your job and your income, they're going to give you a number called the EFC, and that's expected family contribution. They are going to determine how much money you can contribute to yourself. If that number is low, the government gives you a free gift. And pretty much anybody who makes a low to average salary will qualify for the federal Pell Grant. You can make $40,000 and maybe have 2 or 3 kids. You're going to get it. Now, if you are a single person, you make $60,000, no, you won't get it. But the average American can receive and go to college with just grants and avoid the inconvenience and headache that are loans.
So that does answer the future. So what do you say, though, to those people that have already made bad decisions?
Well, at this point, there's not much you can do but try to correct it. So you're not going to undo it. Just make your payment. You don't want to not make your loan payments. If you skip a loan payment, they can levy your taxes. On top of that, it goes on your credit report. When you're trying to purchase a house, that is going to show up there. You don't want to be in bad graces with the federal government, so make the payment, but never make the minimum payment. And that goes to any credit. If you have a credit card, if you have a mortgage, if you have a car payment, a lot of people make the payment that they tell you to make. Never make that payment. Add an extra 10%, 20%. If you can afford to double it, pay $100 extra than what they tell you, because every dollar that you pay extra pays off the principal and it doesn't go towards the interest. If you make the minimum payment, 75% of the money that you're paying is all interest. You're never knocking off what you borrowed.
All right. So when I went through the Financial Peace University, one of the things that Dave Ramsey talked about was not only examining your finances. Like I said, for me, it was Starbucks. For some people, it could be other things. You know, they really have to examine what's going out of their pockets. And like you said, it could be a car note. You may have to get rid of your car. You may have to downsize. I know one of the things I did, I unfortunately went through a painful divorce. And one of the things I saw that I could easily save money on was cable TV. I was spending $200 a month.
Oof.
Just on cable TV, and that helped me a lot, just having that in savings. But some of the other things that Dave Ramsey talked about was snowballing. Snowballing is basically where you look at the card or the thing with the highest payment on it, and you start snowballing payments on that to try to get that one out of the way first. But that may require you to call the lenders to see if they will allow you to some flexibility as you try to get your payments under control, because I believe that lenders would rather get their money back than have you actually go bankrupt and not get their money back. So that's one of the things that you can do is call your lenders, try to consolidate if you can. If you have the kind of credit that would allow you to go to a lender and consolidate a loan for a lower interest rate on a bunch of cards, that's one of the ways that can actually help you to turn it around. And again, examine your finances. You got to do this because it's not just for you, it's for your future. And again, as we were talking about last week, it's about building a future for not just yourself, but for your kids. And then your kids will be the ones sitting here talking instead of me and Sanchez.
I'll tell you what, the day that I have kids, I am going to expose them to every single story and obstacle that I went through, because it's imperative that when you finally reach success, if the second generation that comes after doesn't know the story of struggle, they won't have a sense of identity. They're going to associate themselves with a distance, a form of family member that is not even experiencing or close to what you went through.
I'm sorry for laughing, but Courtney said that it sounds like I'm cutting out Starbucks and luxuries. You're right, Courtney. I am. I was cutting out luxuries. Again, I was in the military, and she says that you're cutting out fresh fruit and essentials. So,
Well, look. Here's the thing.
I want to meet you, Courtney.
It's all about perspective. Bobby is gonna forego the coffee, and I'm just gonna fast for a month. Okay. I think with those two things, we'll save a lot of money.
Look, I actually started making my own coffee. I learned how to make coffee that tasted as good as Starbucks. So now I treat myself to Starbucks instead of saying I deserve Starbucks.
I remember when I first approached a Starbucks, and I was working for a university, and they had me travel throughout the country to go to different meetings, whatnot, and I saw a Starbucks, and I went in there, and I tried to see, okay, how much is, mind you, I'm from Miami. In Miami, in every corner, we have cafeterias that sell Cuban coffee, and each hit or shot of that Cuban coffee is 99 cents. So when I went in there, I looked at the prices, and I saw $7.69. I thought, okay, whoever created this is a genius because you're exploiting white people. White people don't know the price of coffee. They don't know the price of the labor. If you want to know about coffee, you need to go to Central America or the Middle East or South America or the Caribbean, where coffee is made and made cheaply. So I've always boycotted places like Starbucks or anything that I feel I'm being taken advantage of.
Right.
And that, I think that's what we're trying to get at. So at this point of your lives, wherever you are, you have to realize that what's going to make you the most money is somehow getting yourself to own a home. And here's how. There's several layers to this. If you can own a home, one, you are not going to worry about increasing rent. You're going to have the same mortgage for the rest of the 30 years that you signed for, and you don't have to live all 30. You can sell it before then. Two, how do you make money, or how do you prosper from a home? Well, the good thing is, I don't know about you, Bobby, but do you expect people to stop having sex?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
In a dream world.
Well, the minute people stop humping like bunnies, that is when we can start worrying about the rent going down. The problem is people are procreating at a higher level than ever. They are having babies left and right, and their babies are having babies. I know a kid who's a student who has a grandmother who's 38.
Wow.
I have a sister who is older than this girl's grandmother.
Wow.
So that goes to show you just how irresponsible we have become as a society. We make all the wrong choices, and then we could go complain about it by protesting and holding up signs and expecting for the government to bail us out. Now, mind you, I understand the frustration when we are making minimal salaries and you have billionaires that just make money while they sleep. I get it. And I'm not saying that you're going to become a millionaire if you follow my tips, because I'm not even a millionaire. But at least I am not where I started. Every year I have made progress with my life. I'm either a year smarter or a year wealthier than the year before. And if we're not making that progress, then we're just aging, but we're not maturing. And I think that's what we're trying to get at, Bobby.
So I guess I need to ask a question. With these birth rates that you speak of, where you're not talking about developed countries. You're talking about the United States. We don't have a real high birth rate here.
No. Worldwide.
Oh, okay.
Worldwide.
Worldwide. Okay.
Yeah, the population of the Earth is approaching 9 billion almost.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, I don't know what the numbers are, but in the 1950s, right before right when World War II ended, just before all the military men came back, the population of the Earth was almost half.
Yeah.
And it's incredible just how many people we've put on the Earth in just 50 years, 60 years. It's fascinating. And if we keep at this rate, what's the Earth population going to be in 20, 30 years?
I guess this goes back to more than that, because I'm doing some research as Sebastian talking. People are probably wondering what I'm doing. And it says that the highest fertility rates are unfortunately in Africa, with Nigeria topping at 7.153 children per woman, followed by Somalia at 6.123. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying that it seems that undeveloped countries are having higher birth rates. And I don't know if these countries are very wealthy countries, but it would seem that these countries could probably benefit from more access to birth control.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of these countries, it's not just a matter of having the birth control. You have to realize that there's socioeconomic issues at play, and religion is a big point. So in some of these countries, they are not allowed to use birth control. For example, Africa is very diverse. You have African countries that are Muslim. You have some that are Catholic and Christian, and you have even some that are Jewish. There's pockets and segments, even within Ethiopia itself. So it depends on what's your culture. And if your culture allows it, and in the schools, for example, we're still teaching in the states that will allow us a health class. There are some states and some districts where you can't even mention sex education or health education because it's the governing parents and bodies that what do they want? Well, teach abstinence. Abstinence is the way to go because they're more fundamental. They're living in cities or states or countries or districts where religion plays a huge role, and these religious authorities are telling teachers, leave that for the church. Don't talk about that there. And if you are going to talk about it, the message is don't hump. Well, as you can tell, people are not getting the message.
That's not going to happen.
Humping is going to happen left and right. So the key is obviously education, but within means. You might not be able to, you can only do as much as you're allowed to.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I was trying to segue with that was Bobby doesn't expect people to stop humping, all right? We're going to keep reproducing.
Well, as an older guy, I don't know. I would say when I was your age, I wouldn't think it was happening, but now after being married for many years, there could be some reduction. I mean,
it wouldn't hurt if we calm down a little bit.
Well, I think with this new generation socially, I don't know that this generation is the same anymore as far as the interactions and the drive for sexual intimacy, unless they're doing it through computers.
I'll tell you what, here's one, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but if everyone or 90% of the people were to just turn gay, this would be great for the world population. Because that's really the main issue we're having. So I encourage, hey, please.
Not happening. Not
I said 90%. I'll let you be part of the 10. But in any case, what I mean by that is if you're lucky enough or you work hard enough and you get to own your home and you cannot control the world population, you cannot control the population in your city. But as the population starts to increase, and we're seeing that here in Las Vegas more than ever, people in California are getting their asses out of there as soon as possible. They're flying here, they're driving here, they're hopping here. I mean, I'm seeing people move here from California at a rate that I've never seen before, and that's because they can't afford it. Meanwhile, Nevada is still significantly cheaper. On top of that, Nevada has no state tax and no county or city tax like the way that California does. Now, what does that do to the average person who lives in a town like Nevada? Well, if you're renting, you're scared because as people are coming in, supply and demand, that means that the rental prices are going to increase and they're never going to stop. But if you own, you no longer have that fear or phobia because your prices will never increase. And the day you decide to rent your place out, you could rent it out for more than what you are paying for in your mortgage and make a profit. And if you ever decide to sell, it's going to be worth more than you bought it because housing appreciates, unlike vehicles. This is what I tell people. Save your money, ride the bus 3-4 years, buy a bicycle, roller skate to work, do what you got to do. But don't blow your money on a vehicle. Anything with an engine will depreciate. You bought it on Monday, you want to return it on Tuesday? Well, guess what? On Tuesday, it's now worth 90% of what it was on Monday. You bought it for $22,500 with a loan. You want to sell it back? All right, good luck. You're going to get only $17,500 for it.
That's right.
And that's 2 days of driving. And that's just how it works. Every year it depreciates until the car's worth nothing, while a house will appreciate. And this is the key. You need to make the right choices in all aspects of your life. You want to start by budgeting right, getting a credit card, paying it off on time, all of it, all 100% of it. Never buy something just because you have a credit card and be like, oh, I'll get around to it, because you won't. You pay based on what you have in the bank, not what you expect to have. And finally, I guess you would agree with this, Bobby. If you pay your bills on time, if you have a credit card and you do that properly, is that going to help your credit score?
Yes, definitely.
And what is the advantage of having good credit score?
Well, that opens up other opportunities. That allows you to get the car that you really want, to get the house that you really want. I mean, every choice from that also improves your children's financial future. So just by changing that itself. So if you, as the first generation, are willing to make those hard choices and teach your children those hard choices, because I think that's the other thing. You just can't stop getting Starbucks and take away cable TV without explaining this to your children. It's not just about hardships. It's about teaching them about how to overcome, you know?
Yeah, what you say is actually a very honest and candid conversation that parents are not having with their kids. And I can tell you this from, I don't want to say that my mom explained everything to me, but I used to go clean houses with her as a kid. And I was very observant and mathematical and logical, so I would do math based on what they paid her. And I would notice she cleans one house a day. She's getting paid $40. Luckily, there were days she'll clean 2 in one day. So that's $80. And then I would factor in when she would buy me food or breakfast when the bus would get to this certain terminal, she would buy me a piece of bread, a toast, a Cuban toast, and she would never eat. And I would wonder, why wouldn't she eat? was she not hungry in the morning? And it didn't occur to me to years later that she was always hungry. It just wasn't in the budget, because if she fed herself and me, that's cutting into the bus fare, the food fare, and on the way back, the $40 profit that we made now turns to $25. And that's significant when someone makes as little as my mom was making. $25 a day is not a lot of money. $30 a day is not a lot of money. $30 a day times 30 days, that's $900 a month. You can't live anywhere with that. So you have to either clean 2 houses or have 2 jobs or work overnight and get very little rest. So as a child, I saw this and we had conversations about it. And I knew what the rent was when I was 6 years old. My mom had me memorize my social security number when I was 8, just in case immigration ever caught me. And I had to memorize another lady's address who was an American citizen just in case I get caught, so I don't give my own address and have my whole family sent back with me. So mind you, if at 8 years old I'm having these thoughts, I was definitely paying attention to what the rent cost. I remember when I was 10, the rent was $725. I remember when I was 8 and we lived in a building that was a little cheaper, we paid around $575. And when I turned 11 and my mom moved to a community that we only paid $650 for rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. These are things that kids now not only don't know, but are not being explained or informed. Finances isn't just the mom and dad's job. It's the family's job.
That's right.
You want to have a tight family unit. You want everyone to be accountable and responsible. Well, then it takes being transparent with every member so everyone has a role.
Yeah.
It gives them a purpose. It gives them a drive. And ultimately, it makes them more connected to their family and to their community.
True. That's preaching right there. I think that's one of the things that I don't want to generalize this whole generation, but it seems like there's an expectation of privilege now. Kids now, Wi-Fi is accepted, PlayStation 4s and $600 gifts. I mean, when I was growing up, you didn't see $600 gifts. You didn't see $200 tennis shoes. I know kids that not only have one pair of $200 tennis shoes, but 6 pairs of $200 tennis shoes. But, and then you see the parents and you're like, okay, so you provided all this for the kids, but what about the future? It's not just about now. It's about the future.
And you know what? One thing that I noticed growing up in the neighborhoods that I did, it was very common for a lot of us kids to have somewhat similar backgrounds. We came from very diverse communities, but when it came to something like legal status and actual finances, I knew right away which ones were my friends that had legal status, and I knew which ones were my friends whose parents make over $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. And I'm telling you, I'm 11 years old, but I already knew based on the cars they drive, based on the neighborhoods that they live in. And here's the one thing that I think is crazy that nobody else besides myself noticed. My friends who had Gatorade in their houses, those were my rich friends. I mean, think about it. I was a kid. We drank from La Manguera, okay? Manguera, that's the hose, the metal piping at the end. You put your mouth on it in the summer, you burn your lip, the tongue falls off, and the water comes out boiling hot. You have to wait about 35 seconds before it starts to cool down to room temperature, and that's what you drank. And when you played outside, there was no Sefri Hills, no Dasani. You didn't bring your own little bottle that was a thermos. None of that existed. You drank from the free. It was almost like the well water. It wasn't even, I'm talking about purified water fountains. We didn't have that.
Okay.
And when I would go visit my friends and they would be like, you want something to drink? I kind of felt bad. I was like, no, just water, this is what I'm used to. And then they opened the fridge and I would see a Gatorade, not just a Gatorade. They had the packs of Gatorade, 12-pack in there, and they would hand me a whole bottle for me. And I remember feeling, holy crap, I get to have a bottle? Like I was just expecting to have a sip of his leftover ass in the bottom. The ass part of the drink where all the goos.
Wow.
That's what I was expecting. But no, I got my own bottle, and that's how I knew, whoa, man, I have a long way to go. I want to get to a point where I can afford Gatorade.
See, that's how different times were. See, Gatorade as a product didn't exist until super athletes became the thing on TV when Michael Jordan or the other thing. When I was growing up, it was Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid.
But the poor folks that couldn't afford Kool-Aid drank a cheap knockoff called Flavor Aid, which was, it was horrendous. If there's anything that's cheaper than Kool-Aid and your parents are buying it, they've already taken the first step towards changing your situation.
Would you say that Flavor Aid was like what Chappelle used to refer to as red drink?
Yeah, both of them were red drink.
When he says, what the fuck is juice?
Flavor Aid was like, say, Kool-Aid would cost you 30 cents. I don't know what it costs now. Flavor Aid was like 5 cents.
Yeah.
So you were literally just getting dye. I don't know if there was anything beyond just the colored dye.
And I feel that because I don't know if we have any East Coast listeners, but how many of you have ever drank RC Cola or Czech Cola?
I've had both.
I mean, talk about crap.
Yeah.
Not even close to the original recipe that Coca-Cola or even Pepsi did. I mean, they missed it by a mile. But those bottles, I don't know if you remember, we used to buy Czech Cola, a 2-liter bottle for 49 cents.
Oh, wow.
49. It was cheaper to get your kids sugary soda, bad soda, than it was to actually buy them respectable water.
See, your generation got soda. My generation got ginger ale. Have you ever?
Oh, of course.
That's really horrible. It's like the punishment soda for kids. If you really want to tell them it's Sprite,
Yeah, right.
give them ginger ale.
But hey, it's making a comeback, though. Now I'm noticing a lot of people are ordering ginger ale at bars. I mean, this is coming from a person, that, mind you, I have very little liquor experience. I worked as a bartender 3 years, but I've never been drunk in my life. So my credibility is a little weak when it comes to drinks. But if I had to go to a bar, I would order a ginger ale.
Okay. So with that, I just wanted to touch on, did you cover this point?
Yeah. So I wanted to thank a lot of people who are commenting right now, who are online. I appreciate the response. And if you have any questions, just feel free to chime right in through the chat. You can call us in. Our phone number is 702-551-5261. Again, this is all about trying to promote a healthy financial status for those of us, for anyone who looks like me, looks like Bobby, even if you don't look like us and you come from a non-minority group, chances are you probably still could benefit. Half this country is white but not wealthy.
That's a to me not a well-known fact. I think when people see poor people on TV, they often are associated with people of color, but they forget that the larger majority of poor people in this country are white, right? And they get, I believe, misleading information that minorities are the people that are traditionally just getting all of the benefits. Well, I'm from the state of Mississippi. There's a large amount of minorities down there that are poor. But if you go to other places, there are equally a large number of Caucasian people. And that takes me to another point. I have some friends out there that will listen and say, hey, Bobby, is this show just about minorities? No, it's not. When we talk about the minorities, we're talking about the minority opinion, those people that aren't being heard, those people that aren't getting the right advice. The Minority Report is a representative program that gives the underrepresented, the uninformed a voice and a chance to get some information and share some information, thanks to Mr. Sebastian Sanchez, and myself.
Now, I got to say...
And Carice, of course.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. If you're listening or not listening and you see this title, you're either going to think this is a Tom Cruise podcast, which... by all means, we're definitely not going to be addressing Tom Cruise. Or you're going to think that this is only about minorities, right? But like he said, we are all in some form a minority unless you have the majority of the power. Yeah. And that is very few people. There's very few. There's less than maybe 100, less than 50 billionaires in the world. And out of the millionaires, not all of them are represented correctly. And one of the things that people always try to keep their eye on is making it big, making it so big, making it big, and their ideas usually are involved with fame. A lot of kids in high schools that I taught, especially the boys, their goal was either be a professional rapper, professional basketball player, professional football player, and it was one of those three. They didn't have a fourth realistic option. And mind you, out of all the students that I've had, I've only had one student to make it to the collegiate level as an athlete, but none of them have made it from my group of kids to the professional level in any sport. And what I mean by that is, I'm not telling you to give up on your sport or your dreams if you're a kid, and if you're a parent, promote them, but you have to promote them responsibly. You have to give kids a realistic option in case the fame doesn't pan out. They need to have skills. They need to be skilled workers. They need to be informed. They need to go, hopefully, to college, get some sort of training, so that way they can provide their future families with respectable work and never have to fear homelessness, never have to fear bills not being paid, not being able to feed their children. And ultimately, this is what's happening throughout the country. We have a generation that perhaps was unprepared at the time, and now their kids are facing the consequences, where sometimes you have to have that uncomfortable conversation with a kid who's telling you, look, I'm going to go to the NFL. Well, if you're 5'7" and you weigh 150 pounds, it's probably not going to happen. Either find another option, or maybe the family needed to have had this conversation sooner. And I wanted to mention that just because there's so many kids right now, boys and girls throughout the country, who are planning these great futures, and we want to encourage that. But we also need you to be responsible about your planning. What are your thoughts on these issues we've discussed here, Bobby?
Oh, I agree with everything. Like I said, I think the one thing I don't want to leave out is that a lot of people have stated that, they're already in these situations. And I think the big thing, again, is to get the information. If you don't know where to get the information, contact us. Reach out to someone that can help you get the information, because I think that's the first step to making the change. Before you make another bad step, see if there's someone that's out there that can give you the financial insight so that you can make these changes, and then start making the change if it's possible. I know it's easier said than done, but like I said, you have to do it. Like I said, if it's something as simple as not going to Starbucks,
absolutely,
don't go to Starbucks.
And you know what? We'll dive into more of the specifics. Hopefully, in next week's show, we'll talk more about the home ownership and the actual process to get it going. But if I can address one topic now, with the time that we have remaining, it would be for those of you that are currently in some sort of financial turmoil. You have debt, you've racked up credit card debt, maybe you made wrong choices, you have failed business ventures, poor investments. Here's my advice to you. One, whatever it is that you're losing money on the most, stop the bleeding there. Okay? If you have a failing business, if you have a failing investment, stop it while you can. Okay? Control the bleeding. And two, don't rack up any more expenses than you already have. Do not take out another credit card to pay an existing credit card. Do not get a shark loan or a payday loan just because you think that's your only option, okay? And do not, under any circumstance, try to live a comfortable life by getting a vehicle, okay? I can't stress this enough. And it's going to be hard for you to maybe even understand this, because you probably already have an overpriced vehicle. But when your lease is up, or when you are almost done paying off your vehicle, hold on to it for a couple of years. Don't get yourself back into another payment. You'll be surprised what not having to pay $500 or $600 a month on a vehicle will do for you in the long term. I mean, that's about $7,000 almost in a year. And then talk about 3 years later, you have $21,000 in income that you didn't have, all because you're driving a paid car or you're taking the bus. And trust me, there's a reason why the buses were created. They're good for the environment. It's much better to transport a multitude of people in a bus than it is having everybody driving around. But for the most part, you want to make decisions that are going to positively impact you rather than just get you in more debt.
Okay.
Any thoughts, Bobby, before we send off for next week?
I think you kind of did a good recap. One of the things I like to add to this, too, is when you start to change that situation, one of the things I think that also goes unnoticed is that you can't make controls or changes to your environment until you are able to contribute somehow to your neighborhood. And by that, I mean, like, a lot of people complain about their neighborhoods not having the same economic advantages as some of the richer neighborhoods, and that's because they have a lower tax bracket. And until you start making the changes to bring yourself up and your neighbors start bringing themselves up, then you're going to continue to be needing some help. So I think, again, the thing we can't underscore enough is that you got to get the information, not find the information, get the information. There's people out there that are willing to help. You just got to be willing to ask. And with that, I think that's all I wanted to add to that.
I appreciate your thoughts, Bobby. Always a pleasure having you here. And we look forward to next week continuing where we left off. We're going to tackle more in depth of the actual real estate system itself. I have a little bit of experience with real estate, not just as a buyer or as a seller, but I'm also, working towards my license. And I can give some good tips for those of you that are trying to actually build your equity. In other words, you're trying to get out of that rental contract that seems like it never ends. We'll talk about in detail next week to see what are logistical ways for you to make that improvement. And I look forward to seeing you next week again, Bobby. And thank you for the time, and thank you to all the viewers.
All right. Thank you, Carice, again, for this great format and forum. I also like to thank our guest.
Oh, absolutely. A shout out to Diana Murcia, our wonderful guest who came today, my wonderful girlfriend, and my #1 fan.
And all of the people that added comments, I just appreciate you listening in to 72.5, Hot 72.5 FM, and Carice, who put this on. One of these days, you guys get to see the face behind this wonderful platform.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone.